At this time, I would like for you to take just a moment of silence in remembering Eric Joring. May we bow our heads in prayer. Precious Father, as we come to you tonight, remembering these two men, I ask that you'd be with this council meeting. Help each one of these folks on this council, from the mayor, the city manager, the council, all the support staff and friends, and those that are here tonight, that you would just help them, because this is a great city. Delaware is a tremendous place to raise a family. I had the privilege of raising all three of mine, and I have 3 grandchildren. Lord, it's a loving place, and I thank you for men and women that have stood strong in these council seats, because they have big decisions to make tonight. Guide them, direct them, give them the knowledge, the wisdom to make Delaware and continue to make Delaware a great and growing city. Thank you, Lord, for everything. Be with these officers' families tonight, Lord, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held January 22nd, 2018, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
Move approval. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting that was held on January 17th, 2018. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Planning Commission work session meeting that was held on January 29th, 2018. Item C, acceptance of the motion summary of the Shade Tree Commission meeting that was held on November 28th, 2017. Item D, acceptance of the motion summary of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting that was held on November 29th, 2017. Item E, acceptance of the motion summary of the Public Works Public Utilities Committee meeting held on April 4th, 2017. Item E, establish February 26, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and second reading for ordinances number 18-11, an ordinance approving a rezoning amendment to allow a PMU, Planned Mixed Use Overlay District at 250 Curtis Street on the north side of Firestone Drive on approximately 3.64 acres on property zone POI, Planned Office Institutional District, for an actively owned and managed 40 dwelling unit, low and moderate income affordable housing development. And ordinance number 18-12, an ordinance for Delmore Dwellings Corporation approving a conditional use permit allowing the placement of a PMU, Planned Mixed Use Overlay District, to be established at 250 Curtis Street on the north side of Firestone Drive on approximately 3.64 acres on property zone POI, Planned Office Institutional District, for an actively owned and managed 40 dwelling unit, low and moderate income affordable housing development. And for ordinance number 18-14. An ordinance for Delmore Dwellings Corporation approving a comprehensive plan amendment on the future land use map from medium-density single-family to mixed use at 250 Curtis Street on the north side of Firestone Drive on approximately 3.64 acres on property zone POI PMU, Planned Office Institutional District, with a Planned Mixed Use Overlay District for an actively owned and managed 40 dwelling unit, low and moderate income affordable housing development.
Thank you.
Move for approval of consent agenda. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 on the agenda is letters, petition, and public comments. I do think Aaron Fletcher.
Is Aaron here, Fletcher from the Ross Museum?
Okay. Okay. So this time is set aside for things that are not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward tonight?
I have something. Hello, everybody. Tom Walber, 272 Hearthstone Drive in Delaware. Some of you may know that I'm a member of Sustainable Delaware, Ohio. So I'm here to plant a little seed. I'll be brief here. A recent Columbus Dispatch article, February 10th, explored the lack of recycling options for multifamily residences in Franklin County. A survey conducted last year by SWACO, the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio, concluded that people are indeed eager to recycle. However, nearly half of the residents in multifamily units, apartment buildings, condominiums, townhouses, and duplexes reported lacking recycling options at their building. Surging demand for affordable rental units in the Columbus housing market is adding a sense of urgency to access to recycling and waste stream reduction. SWACO plans to work closely with housing developers to help remove barriers to recycling and to encourage them to build apartments in a way that includes recycling stations. The city of Delaware has, as we all know, the same problem. Numerous multifamily complexes have large dumpsters for trash, but no receptacles for recycling whatsoever. How about, and that's the seed I'm planting, which will take many years, to germinate. How about if the Planning Commission and City Council make it a stated condition to include recycling options for new multifamily residences before approval is granted? In addition, existing multifamily complexes should or could be retrofitted within a reasonable time frame, let's say, within 5 years or so. Recycling should be a point of pride for communities, not an afterthought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward?
Thank you for your time. I have one thing. I'm Craig Campbell. I live on Carter Street. And as you guys sit and think about what Mr. Wilson wants
Hold
to
the
do,
microphone toward you. Thanks.
when you guys sit and think about what Mr. Wilson wants to do, bear in mind that Curtis Street, as it stands, is dangerous. Before we let him do his thing, which is okay with me, let him build whatever he wants to build, I'm cool. We're going to have to put the sidewalks in from Firestone all the way to London Avenue. We're going to have to finish the sidewalks from the tracks on Park Avenue all the way to Curtis Street. That's really what I've got to say, and we have to be safe about this, Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else that would like to come forward at this time? Okay. If you read item 8 in the agenda, please. Or wait, let's do committee reports. Mr. Jones?
The only thing I have, Mayor, is we did have a Public Works meeting last week, and nothing of major conversation to talk about, but just let you know we did meet last week.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Keller? I have nothing. Mr.
Thanks,
Chairman?
Christy.
Nothing.
One part we say from each other.
Okay. And there was a planning and it was very exciting. We'll just leave it at that. Item 8 is the second reading of Resolution 1809. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Resolution number 18-09, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a joint venture agreement for the Delaware Entrepreneurial Center.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. We come back before you this evening in regards to the joint agreement for the Entrepreneur Center between the county, the city, and Ohio Wesleyan University. I'm happy to announce that this morning the county commissioners passed the ability to sign into this joint agreement with 2 votes for signing the agreement and 1 abstention. So we're on our way from that perspective. We have a presentation here, short one, if you can bring that, Elaine, in regards to, we'll quickly go through this. I have a lot on the agenda tonight, I understand. We did also find out, and Megan can speak a little bit more to this, this is not in here, that this is the first project of its kind in the nation, between a private liberal arts institution,
That's correct.
a county, and a city, on an entrepreneur center. I think that's a huge point of pride that Delaware can show a leadership role in developing these types of centers in the nation. Just quickly, and I'm sorry, this is Megan Ellis. She's with the Waltamati Center at the Ohio Wesleyan University. Thank you. Oh, all right, I get the pointer. All right, so the Entrepreneur Center joint agreement. The proposed Entrepreneur Center would be utilizing Ohio Wesleyan University Stewart Annex building, which is the old bookstore building on South Sandusky. This is a 6,000 square foot facility roughly. It would be a 2-floor entrepreneur center with 2 entry points. It would contain offices, conference rooms, co-working space, classrooms, outdoor space, lounge space, and creative gathering spaces for people to branch out and work in very creative manners. The timeline for this project, we'd hope to break ground, start the renovations in March of this year if we can sign the agreement. The renovations would hopefully be complete. Target goal is August 2018, which is the time that the university starts back up with their academic year. So the goal is to really get it open before students get back on campus, with a August 22nd grand opening for the center. All right. Example of programming, quarterly basis, we'd look at doing signature lectures, business leadership courses, business ethics, economic outlook, networking, monthly educational programming open to the Ohio Wesleyan University community, the greater Delaware City community, and the greater Delaware County community, as well as the startup community, of which we already have done a great deal of work with Delaware Does in the last year, and that's still building. We'd have monthly lunch and learns, daily interactions with students and startup owners to try to bring the students and the startups together and allow students to learn while startups are taking advantage of great low cost and sometimes free resources with students. This is a perform and pay for renovations and remodel. The university's part in this is to perform and pay for renovations and remodeling, to provide insurance for the center, provide space for the city's economic development department, as well as occasional use space for the county's economic development department. The agreement term would be an initial 5 years with an option of 2 5-year extensions, which would be reviewed after the first 5 years based on performance and goal setting. The city and county's contribution would be each entity would pay the university $50,000 per year for 5 years for the operations of the center. Each reserve the right not to pay in a given year if the center is not performing to expectations. So there's safety clauses built throughout the agreement to allow us to have make sure the center is living up to expectations. If revenues exceed operating, this is very important. If revenues exceed operating expenses, the advisory board may reduce the payment to the city and county for the operations. Essentially, if the center is really paying for itself to operate, the subsidy, if you look at it that way, can be lowered to operate the center. The advisory board will oversee operations and develop an operations committee to assist the university president appointed center manager, which would be, in this case, Megan. Both the advisory board and the operations committee would be very representative of all 3 entities, as well as the startup community itself. So it'd be a public-private partnership if you look at it that way. These are some renderings that were actually just completed, Megan, in the last week
Yes.
of the first and second floor.
We often work with a company called Thomas Marker, and so this is the rough, just hand sketched. They are working on the CAD drawing so we can see more visually appealing, but you can see here the office space. There's going to be a lot of glass and see-through, so that way it's very open. Natural light will be able to come in. It'll be very inviting, creative space.
Some of the materials and furniture and whatnot that it could look like that hasn't been selected yet, but this is kind of just a visual idea of what these spaces can look like at build out. And I believe that's all we have in terms of presentations. Anything you wanted to add, Megan?
I was just going to share, I just returned from a conference where I was meeting other representatives from universities who are starting innovation and entrepreneurship centers on their campuses. And as I shared our story about working with the city and the county, it was very unique. They mentioned, oh yeah, you know, they let us be there, or they maybe have somebody who comes over once in a while. But for them to see that we're all partnering together, that was very unique, and they were really excited about that. And I agree that we're really raising people who are going to be in Delaware with an affinity to staying in Delaware, bringing up their businesses and their families here.
I believe the county commissioners acted affirmatively this morning in authorizing their agreement.
Yes, absolutely.
So we now have the Delaware County, obviously they're 1/3 of the partnership, which is great.
Sean, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm all for it. But I mean, the very next item on our agenda is the exact same thing. You know, so what's the difference between the Cohatch and the one with West One? And can you remind me how much money is going from the city to this, and how much money is going to the city for that? I mean, we'll have two entrepreneurial centers within a block of each other, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I support it. It's just
No, I appreciate that question. This is a true entrepreneur center for startups. So this is for your first or second phase companies that primarily generally have not been funded. So these are the guys who have an idea that they need to get on paper, build business plans to try to secure funding at a future date. Cohatch is for existing businesses. These are third and fourth phase companies that have already been funded. They have employees. They're operating. So this would be a feeder. If you look at it this way, this would be a feeder to the other. So as we start rolling them through here, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and then vice versa as well. If somebody approaches Cohatch and they're not really at the stage to be a Cohatch member, they would then be referred to us as well. We also would be bringing in the educational piece, so it'll really kind of feed nicely into it, create a nice cycle.
So do you, as the director of this, you see a synergy between the two?
Absolutely.
Not a competitive thing, a synergy.
No, but I'm glad you asked, because at first when we heard about Cohatch, we were a little leery as well. But then after talking to Sean and meeting with Matt, we know that it'll really make a nice community and bring more entrepreneurs into the area.
If you recall back when we did the entrepreneurial, I'm trying to remember what we called it back then, but study, for lack of a better term, in 2013, 2014, one of the things that the consultant had indicated at that time is, you know, the best way to go about this is to try to create a nucleus of education and resources that would then serve multiple other entities. And, you know, this center, you know, could serve Cohatch with resources and education. It could serve, if we had a makerspace open up here, which is an entirely different concept. This is the center where those entrepreneurs in that type of makers facility could receive education, training, student assistance, and whatnot. And that takes a lot of the burden off those other entities to try to develop that programming themselves. So it creates a lot of synergy and efficiency to have a centralized location that's doing those things and specializes in those things, and let those other entities really do what they need to be doing.
Okay, great. It helps me clarify that.
Thank you, Chris.
Any other questions?
So we're seeking council's authorization tonight. This is a project that we've spent several years on, and obviously it's an exciting opportunity for our community. I've reminded folks before, and I'll say it again, is when we did our community survey in 2015, one of the highest ranking priorities of our community was economic development opportunities. Create more opportunities for us to perhaps start businesses in the community and stay here and be employed here. These types of centers are the ways to make those things happen. So this is, I think, this is kind of a real milestone, I think, for the university, the community, and the county to be able to do this. And I didn't realize the first one in the, so we're not going to get a letter tomorrow from Trinity University
No.
saying we did this with the city of Hartford and.
No, and there's other very large universities who have similar
Yeah, Penn State,
situations for
others, yeah,
sure.
right.
But we are the first, yes.
Otterbein has done one, but not with Franklin County.
Right. Well, and Otterbein and Ohio Wesleyan are very different in their structure,
Okay.
everything. So they're fairly large, with us being very small liberal arts. It's
Okay.
very, very unique.
So what is the wish of council?
I will move for passage of Resolution 1809.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Browning, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to drop down to item 10, which is public hearing 720.
Ordinance number 18-04, an ordinance repealing and replacing code sections 108.02 and 108.04 of the City of Delaware Administrative Code establishing general rules and regulations for the disposition of personal property.
Mr. Schulman?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is a very simple change, but it might get complicated based on what I put together for this meeting. The simple change is we were proposing to raise the amount that staff can sell for personal property, which is basically not land that the city doesn't need, to $10,000. And then we combined our sections and we can put those on it's called Gov Deals, but it's basically eBay for government surplus properties. Comments received last meeting from council indicated that you might be interested in having two changes to that. One, raise that limit. So I have language in there as kind of an alternative to raise that to 15,000. Then we had some discussion as well, how do we make sure we don't get in this hole again? Because as I look at the ordinance, it looks like this number hasn't been changed at least since 87, and it might be 73. So I built in another proposed change to the ordinance that would have us review this every year as part of our budget process. And we would give council recommendations on whether this amount should be raised, or it could be lowered if for some reason we want to change it each year. And that would be similar to our review of the fee ordinance that we are supposed to do every year as well. So those are the two ways I thought to address the comments I got last time from City Council. But since we didn't have a vote, I put them in there as a possible amendment. So if you're interested in those changes, you would move to amend the ordinance to accept those changes. We'd have a vote on that. Then you would move to adopt the ordinance as done, so like we normally do. But I just wanted to walk you through those, and I don't think we need that done today. If you wanted to talk about it or vote for the amendments but not the overall package, that's a possibility too, that we can give you a clean copy next meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Darren? What is the wish of council? It's not too controversial.
Public hearing?
Oh, yeah, I guess we should ask them. Well, but it's up to the public. Is anybody here that would like to come forward on this subject?
This is what they're all here for.
I know, I can tell.
Surplus
No
property.
hands are going up, though. Okay, we'll close that public hearing.
We would recommend council's action if you so desire.
First, we need to move to adopt the amendments. Can we do that in one fall swoop and get both of those amendments?
Yeah, because I just wrote them as one amendment package, so if that's okay, you could do them as together.
Then I'll move to adopt the amendments to ordinance 1804. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
So now those amendments are part of the legislation and you can proceed as you normally do.
So I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1804
Second.
Does he need to say as amended?
as amended.
Thank you.
Can't hurt.
A motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move for the approval of ordinance 18-04 as amended.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer? Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 11 is a public hearing for second reading on ordinance number 18-05. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 18-05, an ordinance for Fisher Homes for approval of a temporary sales trailer at the Ravines at Olentangy located on the north side of Curve Road, just east of Armstrong Road, on property zoned R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay.
Thank you. Mr. Effler?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is for a temporary sales trailer at the development known as the Ravines at Olentangy. Just for a refresher, it's on Curve Road. It's 2 entrances planned and currently being under construction. One directly across the street from Armstrong Road and Curve Road, North Street intersection. And that's approximately where this trailer will be. Property is zoned planned mixed use overlay in a variety of sub areas. Aerial photograph, and you might be able to see the blue dot. That's the location of the trailer. This is in your packet. Might be a little bit easier to interpret it there because this has a lot of contour lines on it. But this is the aforementioned Armstrong North Curve intersection. This is the start of the subdivision road. Here is the proposed sales trailer with 4 parking spaces and ADA ramps into the trailer. The zoning code provides, although it's unusual, it does provide for temporary sales trailers. This is the first one on, at least in my experience, that we've had here. Typically, we have a model home. I think Fisher Homes would prefer to have a model home, and they're racing to try to get that done. They can't get that done until the infrastructure is in and accepted by us, the plat is recorded, and a building permit can be released at that point for the model home. Then it takes them 3 or 4 months to build that model. So the code actually provides for anything over 45 days, a conditional use permit for planning commission to make a recommendation to you, and you ultimately to decide how long that trailer can be there. Your planning commission voted unanimously to recommend the ordinance in front of you, which would have the trailer there for a maximum of 6 months or until the model home receives a building occupancy permit, whichever comes first. There are a few other conditions in there as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Staff does recommend approval of this at this time.
Any questions from Mr. Effler? Would the applicant like to add anything at this time?
I don't believe so. I think
We're good.
you summed it up pretty well.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so we'll open it to the public. Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward on this subject at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. What is the wish of council?
A quick question, Dave.
Yes, sir.
At the time of the occupancy, what's the time frame after that till the trailer has to be removed? Is it?
As soon as they get an occupancy permit for the model home, the trailer needs to be removed and the site needs to be put back to, I think this was basically grass and open space.
I guess what I'm saying is, what's the time frame of that? I mean, obviously they're issued the.
Oh, the actual build time?
I don't know. They're issued the occupancy permit.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't expect them to move it out the next, get rid of it the next day. What's the time frame from there?
No, that is the expectation.
Oh, it is.
Correct, yeah. When they receive the occupancy permit, they're building the model home, so they should know about when they're ready for occupancy of that, and they can dovetail that with removal of the trailer. I think they want to do that anyway and be selling out of that model home.
Definitely.
And when do you expect to start selling? I mean, you're probably pre-selling now, but actually starting
They
construction.
need that trailer so they can sell them.
Right.
Well, yeah, we need site on premises.
Sure.
And then obviously, until we have the ability to put permit, we really can't sell.
Okay.
So we've done some stuff,
Okay.
but waiting for infrastructure to be in. As soon as we have the green light on that,
Okay.
we'll be selling.
What are the home values anticipated?
250s, 300.
My understanding, I was out there earlier this week, the first course of concrete is down by where our sales trailer would be. So I think the hope is that we would be able to pull permits with that down. I think the list of items that need to be completed is dwindling, but it's all weather permitting. So right now, living in Ohio, it's kind of
Unpredictable.
exactly.
Right.
So they are working on it. Some of the conditions, they've already moved the construction entrance as needed. So we plan to be able to pull permits, again, hoping that we'll be able to do that with just the first course of concrete. So that'll expedite the whole entire process for us. So hopefully this spring.
Okay.
Very good. What is the wish of council?
I move for the suspension of rules requiring 3 readings for ordinance 1805.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Jones, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move for the approval of ordinance 18-05.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, good luck.
Thank you.
We're going to jump back up to item 9, which is the second reading of ordinance 18-02. Elaine, if you please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 18-02, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a lease with Cohatch doing business as Delaware Community Space LLC for a high-end co-working space in the City Hall Annex located at 18 East William Street.
Don, you could at least change, the color scheme up there.
Lee told me I'm not allowed to.
Oh, is that right?
Consistency.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll change the city's colors around here as part of the agreement. Hello again. We're Madam Mayor, members of council, we're here for a second reading on the proposed Cohatch lease agreement. This is an agreement that would allow us to move forward with the next phase, which is, and I know that's already in progress, is looking at building a funding model for the reconstruction renovations of the Delaware, what I refer to as the old Delaware Gazette building next door to City Hall here to the east. As you know, this building has been vacant for a considerable amount of time. This would be an opportunity to put it in good, usable space that Cohatch could utilize and would be a reinvestment in city property and in downtown. The components of the lease as standard, this is a 9,386 square foot space representing the first floor and the basement. That's what the Cohatch would be leasing. Delaware Community Space LLC, which is actually the formal LLC name of Cohatch, will have 5 designated parking spaces for use of their members as part of the lease. My team will assist them in finding other parking throughout the city that they can then purchase passes for or whatnot to help with their membership. The lease term is a 10-year lease term with the right to 2 additional 5-year terms at the end of that first initial 10. The exercising of 2 additional 5-year renewal options includes a 6% rent increase clause for each additional 5-year term after that first 10 years, as long as the DCS is in good standing with the lease. The rent is proposed to be $6,500 per month, which equals $78,000 annually, with the first payment due 90 days after substantial completion of the renovations themselves. The city is responsible for bringing the first floor and the basement of the building to a vanilla box state This is basically a terminology that's used in commercial real estate to the land as the landlord putting it into a state that the tenant can then go in and do their branding improvements and final improvements so that they can move in. It's essentially like you would move into a brand new vacated apartment where they go and change the carpet, the paint and everything. And if they have to work on the HVAC system and all the things for you to go in and do what you need to do to live in it, kind of the same thing. We've estimated that Vanilla Box State will be a negotiated maximum cost of $1.185 $686, $1,185,000 and $686. The city's cost to finance the renovation will be $111,876 annually for 15 years. Factoring in Cohatch's DCS's annual $78,000 rent, the gap between the rent and the renovation cost plus financing is approximately $33,876. The gap would be covered by annual city contribution and is considered part of the city's incentive. However, I will add, this is again a reinvestment in a city property. So even if Cohatch were to ever leave the building for any reason, we could easily then lease it out to another company. So we can't do that right now the way the building stands. DCS is responsible for paying for the final design improvements estimated to a cost of approximately $654,000. And I believe that would include internal and external improvements, Matt, including some landscaping, so on and so forth, and patio work. And
Yep.
Sorry, this is Matt Davis. He's the proprietor. The city's buyout options, there's a safety clause in here. So city must hire an outside firm to determine the need for terminating the lease if we were to ever need to utilize the building for our own office space. The city must provide DCS a 24-month notice of intent to terminate that lease. City must pay DCS 20% of the original budget cost and tenant improvement cost for every month that the lease is canceled prematurely during the original 10-year lease. This option must not be exercised earlier than 8 years from the commencement of the original 10-year lease. So he has a guarantee of at least 8 years if we were ever to try to need the space. This is the terms of this buyout option is fairly consistent with most commercial real estate that you'll find in our downtown right now. Current process is after the lease is signed, we'll finish our financing model. Then start with the RFPs for design build. So we look at this as a design build project. We would then award the contract to the winner of that design build RFQ, and then the construction would begin. The City Hall Annex improvement plans, if we were to move on to the second floor, which this gives us an opportunity to do so. We hope that Jackie's been working on this, that when we put the first floor into Vanilla Box State, we'll stub out all of the utilities, the HVAC, all of those things, so that if we were to need to do the second floor, all that stuff's already there, and then we can just go ahead and finish out the second floor. However, that would require a connector bridge between, I always picture a tiki bridge with flaming torches on it, just kidding, between City Hall and, yeah, they may do that. Darren, we're out of luck. But that would connect to the second floor of City Hall to the annex building next door, and allow for ADA access off the elevator and things of that nature, so that people can easily access the building that way. Again, I mentioned the second floor mechanicals. Why we're adding new windows to the first floor of the building, it only makes sense to go ahead and start looking at adding the second floor windows to have a cost savings there while you're doing that. And then renovation of second floor for office and our meeting space, probably at a future time. I can let Tom talk about that, I guess, a little bit. That was the end of that.
Yeah, we are, like the project before this one, this has been on the drawing board for over a year. When Matt Davis originally contacted us about taking a look, actually Steve Worthington contacted us about something exciting going on in their community. We're at a point now where we're ready to make a recommendation to City Council that we move forward with this project. I wanted Dean just to spend a couple of minutes just talking about how we would approach the financing, because there's some additional steps that are going to require legislative action. So your action tonight authorizes us to enter into a lease agreement with Mr. Davis. It does not authorize the financing, which is we have to do. And we also have to move ahead with the request for the proposals for the actual work for that building. So I just wanted Dean just to spend a minute or two just talking about how we would approach the financing of the project.
Haven't determined what it may look like. It's not a real large amount, a little over $1 million, or depending on how much work we do on the city portion of it, to really stand on its own as a cost-effective debt issuance for the city. Typically they say, $5 million is, otherwise your costs are quite heavy. But just from a timing standpoint, I'm not sure when we're going to move forward or how that'll all play out. But what I'll do to enable us to potentially issue tax exempt is have some legislation that'll do an advanced refunding. And if, let's just say, for whatever reasons, things move pretty quickly and in a couple months' time, we're in a position to sign a construction contract, legally we'd have to have funds on hand or in the process of collection. We would then, prior to that, we'd pass some legislation that would advance money from the general fund to cover it, to enable us to sign the contract. And then we would do a subsequent borrowing, thereafter, and then reimburse the general fund. The nature of what's actually being done and the tenant puts some wrinkles into the financing. We may not be able to issue tax exempt debt because it's a private purpose. It's not a tax purpose. And so we'll work on looking at how that may all play out. But doing the advanced refunding legislation with City Council in advance of signing the contracts buys us some time to work out the amount and the ultimate financing. Any questions? Or
Do we currently, since we own that building, do we currently pay taxes on that building?
we filed for exemption. This is one of those, sometimes it can take 2 or 3 years to get the state to move on that, and we haven't got we'll get reimbursed the taxes that we previously had paid, but as it exists, even though we're not using it for a whole lot other than storage, it does qualify as tax exempt. Once Cohatch or Matt or whatever they are moves in, it wouldn't.
Right.
And they will be.
And you'll be
This is
responsible for the taxes or portion of them?
Correct. This is what I consider a modified triple net lease.
Right.
So essentially, Mr. Davis's company will be responsible for taxes for the first and second, or the lower level and the first floor, sorry. And as well as, minor repairs and stuff. We'd be responsible for major repairs on mechanicals and things like that, as such of as a modified triple net allows. But yeah, it would be a modified triple net lease. I will be coming back here probably in the next month or so with a proposed CRA to assist Mr. Davis with his pro forma in terms of the taxes themselves. He would, with a CRA, this is just like any other downtown renovation CRA, where he continues to pay taxes on the base level, what it is being taxed at today. He'd have a tax break on the improvements, improved value, because it would be improved significantly when we put the dollars into it, even with the, his considerable $654,000 he'd be putting into it. But in turn, and I'll talk about this when I come back, but this project's going to add 24, he's committing to 24 full-time employees with $960,000 payroll. So that's part of our, our return on investment there is that, 1.85% on income taxes, that $960,000. So, this is a considerable project for downtown, especially as, we know that the county is going to be moving some workers out of downtown. I think this and the Entrepreneur Center puts people back into downtown. Hopefully we come to a situation where we're netting out to being even again. So.
Any other questions?
Got a couple. So that $1.2 roughly million of renovation, that's just the first floor, right?
A lower level and first floor.
So,
well, that'll include, and Jackie can talk about this. That includes also the stubbing out to the second floor, so that again we can.
But the intention is the second floor is For our.
City.
City. Okay.
City. And we would be coming back to you with a plan to show how we would eventually be able to expand into that. We could possibly use municipal impact fees for some of that work to the extent that we're adding capacity, office capacity to the city. But it really makes sense at the time that that construction is going to be done to build that bridge, build that connector so the public sees that we're not only providing something for the private sector, but we're also addressing a space issue here at City Hall. So that would be Chris, right out that door there.
It's building's that way.
Yeah. Right.
So where would the opening to the bridge?
It would through this door here.
Oh, so one's built on steps, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go straight out, right, Jackie? That's the idea.
Well-
And that was envisioned when the City Hall was renovated back in 1997, I believe, right? 98.
So my last question is, with renovations or changes, is there going to be anything done to the facade of the building?
Let's turn that over to.
Grand plans.
Yes. No. We plan on going through a complete, basically, part of what we do is to rebrand the environment inside as well as make a proposal for the outside, or with Jackie and the city on what that would look like. We really do love, we will call it something like the paper or something like that to represent the history of it. We want to keep it historical in nature and repurposed as much as possible. That won't go away. The only thing we'll look at a patio and some other things and bring it indoor, outdoor, but that'll stay the same. Trying to bring a little bit of light in the front of the building, but, and then one thing, to answer your question earlier about the Entrepreneur Center is that one simple way to look at it is the Entrepreneur Center is bringing in a ton of students and a ton of startups, okay? We do a lot more than that also. So not only will we have some phase 2 startups, but we have every small business in this town can use us, from title agencies to lawyers to design firms to graphic artists, the people who have small businesses that want to collaborate and improve upon things. And then not only that, but every citizen in this county could use our space. And we have $50 memberships that every citizen could use our space socially, enjoy it, use it with their family and friends, have events there, family reunions, philanthropic events, et cetera. It's way past just what entrepreneurship is only 20% of what we do at the most.
Great.
Yeah.
And you plan on taking advantage of the building in terms of the rear of the building? Because at one point we were looking at lopping that off so we could have circulation, but you've got an idea for the space.
I love the space in the back. I mean, it's very open and kind of warehousey, and we plan on having a significant amount of vents, and even the garage door opens to the kitchen, so you kind of have indoor, outdoor space in the back. But we want everyone to be proud of the space and be able to use the space. That's what we did in the library in Worthington, and that's what we're doing in a couple other projects. So just look forward to getting started. So
To Chris's question about the facade, I was amazed at what Cohatch did with the Worthington Library, building the whole Worthington Library. It still really maintains its historical integrity. You can very much still tell it was that building, but it's just so much nicer now, especially with the outdoor space that he tacked on, which is usable by the public. And we intend for that to be usable by the public here in Delaware too. It's an outside feature that really kind of just extends, again, along with what we've done downtown with the sidewalk bistros and whatnot. This is just more outdoor space to make downtown look lively and whatnot. So I encourage you to just take a look at some of the photos online of the Worthington Library building. It's very, very nice.
So we still have a lot of work to do. So we recommend your approval tonight if you see fit.
Well, did anyone else have any other questions? I know Chris did. We're good. Okay, what is your wish on ordinance 18-02?
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on 1802.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller? Yes. Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 1802.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller? Yes. Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Very appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
We're
Council.
excited. Yes. At this time, we're going to have Erin Fletcher come forward. She was on the agenda and she wasn't able to make it. I guess she had a delay and Tom just got the email. So you piped in, piped out, so. You'll state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Erin Fletcher. The address of the Ross Art Museum is 60 South Sandusky Street, Delaware, Ohio. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I apologize for my tardiness, and I appreciate you having me here tonight. I'll make this short. I am here tonight because I'd like to bring you in at the early stages of consideration of a project that would be spearheaded by the Ross Art Museum if we were to go forward in collaboration with the City of Delaware and the Ohio Arts Council. What we would like to explore is working with San Francisco-based artist Brett Cook to do some community-led mural development in public art in downtown Delaware. Now, the Ross Museum sits, for those of you that haven't been over, sits as sort of a gateway between campus and community. It sits on Sandusky at the edge of the Main Street district. And we have always been free and open to the public and open to the community, but it is my desire as the new director to make sure that we're also doing things that reach out into the community in addition to requiring people to come into our walls to experience art. One of the things that has been mentioned to me by my board members is a desire to see more art in downtown Delaware. Now, it's my understanding that this is also the desire of Delaware City, that this was mentioned in the master plan, and that we just don't yet have sort of a structure for going forward with this on a large scale. So what I'd like to propose is that the museum spearheads a project working closely with the community, community groups, bringing it to the attention of you as council, bringing it to the attention of Main Street Delaware, the Historic Preservation Committee, and just making sure that this is something that everybody could get on board with. Develop 2 to 3 murals in the spring of 2019 that would be on public buildings in downtown Delaware. Now, it is my understanding that this should not in any way negatively impact our historic buildings in downtown that we've worked so hard to maintain and put forward. I have had initial conversations with the business owners of Olivina and the Strand who are initially interested in hosting a mural, although we would need to have more discussions and to make that concrete with the Strand's board. I have also had some initial conversations with other community stakeholders, the Arts Castle, and Roger Koch and several other people, just to get this in their awareness and to see if we could anticipate any potential problems. Now, the Ross would spearhead fundraising for this. In the event that we had a gap at the end, we may come back to the city to ask for support, but the goal is not to put this as a financial burden on the city, only to be a collaboration that is beneficial to the city. So the reason I'm here tonight is just to put this in front of you. We're at the early stages of development. I plan to put a grant proposal into the Ohio Arts Council. I would love to see them expand and support more in downtown Delaware in early March. And so I'm here to put this in front of you and to see if you have questions, concerns, considerations that you'd like me to keep in mind. And if you're interested in seeing this go forward, I would love your buy-in.
Questions? Who will choose what the mural is?
The community will choose what the mural is. This artist has been selected because he has a track record of working with cities. He's worked with San Francisco and Durham, North Carolina. He was also selected by the State Department to be an ambassador overseas. And what his mode of working is by gathering groups of community members, asking what it is that they want their city to be, what it is that they value in this place, and listening and learning. So it's very much pulled from the people, from the stories of the place.
So will you also plan on going before the HPC? I know you're not really changing the building, but would you still go talk to that group?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, we want this to be, I would like to see this as something that everybody is excited about and as a positive addition to the city, not as something that's being imposed on anybody.
We've only been talking about this for about 20 years now, I think. So this is very exciting.
I'm glad. What other questions might you all have for me?
The city, I'm assuming we have some process in place for approval of outdoor art. It's great to pick this artist, but we want to make sure this is something that the city
Absolutely.
approves.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, to the extent that it's on a building exterior, I would think there's some sort of a process that would have to be, we'd have to go through for that.
You're looking at me, under the zoning code, a mural, a pure art mural is it's actually exempt under the zoning code. Now, theoretically, the Historic Preservation Commission also would have jurisdiction over any exterior change. So I think it's just good form at any rate to, collaborate with them. And once you select buildings and that sort of thing, I think if it's the side of Olivino with the sort of the dead billboard space that's there, I can't anticipate anybody having a problem with that unactivated space, but there may be others that, some people might have some more questions.
Yeah, we have the Strand building, for instance, it's a huge canvas there. It's just empty. There's there's some art there now, but there's a number of opportunities for this in the downtown. Erin started talking, she met with me a couple of months ago about it and just said, there's a real interest on the university's part, and Ross in particular, to do more public projects with the community. And that's really what we need, I think, to complement our comprehensive plan goal, which is to have more public art in the downtown. How you judge it and all of that is something we have to deal with, and ultimately what you select. But having them take the lead in this effort will, I think, enable it to probably happen at some point. So I'm excited about it. And I think if you take a look, a lot of the downtowns, the ones that are undergoing a renaissance like the city of Delaware, art is a component of what you're seeing on the street, on buildings, and it adds a certain excitement and energy that you just don't have right now with these big, some of these buildings that are just, they don't have anything on them. So it's exciting. And
where are the
looking
three
forward to it.
canvases? Olivino's, the Strand, what was the
The
third?
Strand and the third hasn't been identified yet.
Oh, okay. I missed something. Okay.
Yeah. And just to speak back, Mr. Avalon, if there is a way in which this project could serve as a model to help the city identify the checkpoints and processes that are necessary to supporting other public projects, we would be happy to document, support, or communicate in any way possible, something that would help the city think more deeply and further about how public art could be supported going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming back. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, which is consideration of 1810. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Resolution number 18-10, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 3-year contract agreement plus 2 optional 1-year extensions with the YMCA of Central Ohio to continue to provide recreation management services.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Miller.
Madam Mayor, members of council, Matt Bruns is here with me from the YMCA, and Jeremy's also here in the audience. So I just wanted to highlight some of the updates we have to the agreement. One of them is the shelter rentals. We've done some updates to the shelter rentals to try to streamline that process a little bit more, and also provide more convenience to the public by allowing online rentals. We're still working through the process of that, but that would be one of the major changes to the agreement. The other change is we're looking at in the past, the YMCA and the city allocated $9,000 towards maintenance of the building. We're looking at just taking that money to the city's fund so that the YMCA. It just will streamline maintenance activities out at the Mingo Center a little easier if the city takes care of. The YMCA, they take care of several, their maintenance department takes care of several different YMCA's. So us streamlining it and taking care of it in the city, I think will make it easier, and we'll control that fund and hopefully continue to get things done. But we'll still coordinate with the YMCA's maintenance staff and keep that process and keep things up to date out there at the building. Some of the other, we're also gonna, the advisory committee is something we're gonna, that was in the agreement before, but we're gonna kind of update that a little bit more with just 2 members of council, 3 members of Parks Board, and then members of the YMCA, and actually have meetings on this with this advisory committee and tackle some of the issues that come up along the way. Those are some of the larger changes. I know I sent a memorandum that had kind of some of the smaller ones in there too, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of those. Unless you have anything to add, Matt?
I just wanted to add, when Ted talked about the $9,000 for maintenance, it comes off the contract.
Yes.
And we're going to take care of the shelter houses now?
We do now. I mean, we get them prepared for rentals. The only thing that our coordination was with the YMCA kind of took the rental in, like documented who was going to rent it. So that's a process we can kind of, and they also took the money in, which then they had to transfer back to the city of Delaware. So that kind of created a financing problem also. Mm-hmm. So we're just trying to streamline that whole process.
Okay. Questions? Comments?
I'd just like to see this go to another. I don't want to act on this tonight.
That's fine. That's fine.
One thing to point out is that they were originally, the request was a 5-year agreement, and I was recommending a 3-year with 2 1-year renewals that could be done administratively. If you want those to come back to city council, let me know. We can make that change. But I think we've had a good track record, but I did want to check on it in terms of that 4th and that 5th year. And I know one of the other changes that we made, I don't know if you saw it, was what was contemplated to establish an advisory committee when we initially had the arrangement with the Y. And the advisory committee was the entire Parks and Rec Board, which is 11 members, plus some city council members. We've shrunken that to, I believe, 2 or 3 members of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board.
3 members.
3 members, and then 2 members of City Council, and then members of the Y. That's more manageable to meet on a quarterly basis and assess progress, issues that have come up, those kinds of things. So that, I think, is an attempt to just provide a little more accountability, both to the Y and to us in terms of what's going on. I know that's, I think that'll work out better. But
Tom, my computer just died, so I lost the paperwork. So what's the contract amount?
Ted, is it one?
She didn't hear you. He didn't hear Jackie.
Okay, for 2018, it's 198,802.
Mm-hmm. So it's currently it was higher in 2017.
So that'd be a 3-year contract, then 2 1-year extensions.
Yeah, right.
What does it go up to then?
I think it's a 2.5%, and that again is that's a call that council, if you feel you want to index that to something.
2008,866.
Okay.
Was the 3rd year.
Okay.
Matt, maybe you can just speak to the experience thus far. I mean, we're in the what year?
6th, I believe.
6th year of this, which was a fairly innovative, outside the box approach to recreation programming. I know Jeremy is out there. Jeremy used to be employed by the city as a rec coordinator, programmer, assistant director, and now he's working for the Y. And I'd be interested in Jeremy's perspective as well, having been on kind of both sides of this.
I'll go quick.
Come on up.
And then Jeremy can go, but you guys have heard me say this before, but, it is, I've been with the Y for 23 years, and to be part of a partnership that has worked this well is pretty neat. I know Jackie and Ted and I and Jeremy get to work pretty hands-on with a lot of things, but, I tried to have some of these type partnerships at a smaller degree with some of the communities I had before, and the vision just wasn't there, but to be able to experience this been on here almost 5 years, it is neat to see the resources that are put into the community that aren't duplicated. They're very efficient with this partnership. That's probably the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway that I see. And being a citizen of Delaware myself, that's somewhere I think is important for not just the Y and the city, but the members that it serves as well. So that part I think is fantastic. I feel fortunate in my career to brought me here. Been very neat 5 years for me, so I appreciate it. But I'll let Jeremy talk more about the programs as he is more in the weeds and hands-on with that.
Come on up, Jeremy.
Good evening. Program-wise,
You have to say your name and address.
I do?
Yes, you do.
Jeremy Byers, 37 Carriage Drive.
Thank you.
Wait, in that case, I'm Matt Bruns, 316 C-Train Drive.
Program-wise, the magnitude of programs and the amount of programs is 10 times as many. When we were with the city, where we're limited staff, I think we had 3 full-time people. And now the programs are still thriving. They're growing. We've added new programs to the list of city programs, from soccer to Mother-Son Superhero Party that is sold out now. Just the response that we've seen as far as registration, I think is something that I don't think would have been able to accomplish had we not had the partnership. So.
How often do you end up using the, I guess someone called the auxiliary gym, the guard gym? Is it using it often now?
Every day.
Really?
Yeah. We utilize the gym pretty much every day. We have close to 600 kids in basketball alone. So the practice times, gymnastics program that's in there, from our, we have a healthy weight in your child program that utilizes some of that space along with the classroom spaces that are over there as well. Our Livestrong program meets over there, along with, any rentals or anything else that we have over there. We have a batting cage in there now, pitching machine, and we do private lessons and just a number of different things that space allows us to do that we were not able to do before.
Yeah, I can't speak for anybody else, but I know we had the hiccups the first year. Just I don't remember the last time I got a call, a complaint about the YMCA. That they don't, like we did when it first started, that growing pain portion. I did nothing. The only thing I ever hear is there's not, basketball. Everybody must play basketball, and that's why I asked about the gym.
Yeah.
So great job.
Thank you.
I did get a phone call this week about the superhero party, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you did. It's a young lady who's really upset because she can't come to it. And it's a mother-son. And she said, but I love superheroes too, and I want to go. And this should not be exclusive. What if I didn't have a dad? What if I had 2 moms? This isn't right. So I don't know if you can just do a mother-son dance and then do a superhero kid dance for everybody. But I thought she had a good point.
Right. And
she was really upset.
And I can see that. And I know that, if that was brought to our attention, Roger would not have told them that they could not come. So we can look at the wording on how we're advertising it to make sure that everybody's being included, for sure.
In fact, I had some discussions on our end of doing a parent-child event.
Right.
Because we do the father-daughter
yes.
dance and then the mother-son superhero party. Maybe we do one where it's not so specific.
Right. That was her point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, I got one more question. And then the staff at the Wire, are they in charge of, if there's issues with the water park? I forget if there's maintenance-wise.
That's still us, right?
They keep an eye on it for
Okay.
us, and then if they're, certainly if something will go amiss, they're right there, they'll respond. But they have the maintenance staff's information. Our staff still takes care of it. Our staff still maintains it and fixes things, but they keep an eye on it.
Okay.
There's been a few people that have walked over and had suggestions or mentioned items to us, and we make sure we pass it all.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
take this to another reading then.
Thanks.
Okay, item 13 is consideration of ordinance 1806. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 18-06, an ordinance approving a performance-based economic incentive grant agreement with CAMS Inc. for electrical upgrades to a building at 105 Innovation Court and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and is necessary to finalize economic development incentives for this project, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you.
Hello, Madam Mayor, members of council. I have another 20-minute presentation. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Exact same layout as last.
it's right. Exactly. Yeah. They all say the same thing too. You're just not noticing. Yeah. Just kidding. I apologize. I just realized Mr. Tevereau is not here. He must have forgotten the hearing was tonight. But I'm here before you to ask for your approval to enter into a performance-based grant agreement with a company by the name of CAMS. This is a company that is owned by Jeff Tevereau. It's a company that produces, well, they started out producing the software that manages machinery and equipment that manufacturers use. It's again, the automated part of the machinery that makes the machinery do what it does. They also I was going to have him explain his company, so I'm kind of filling in here. So they also do the training for that software. So they produce the software, then they actually train companies all over the world how to actually use their software. This relocation from their current POW location into a larger space in Symmetry 2 should be approximately about 20,000 square foot of that building. It's a 60,000 square foot building, if you remember correctly, when we first did the building. So about a third would allow them to actually get into the production of some of this equipment. So these are CNC machines primarily, by the way. Those are the machines that can cut metal pieces and whatnot and do fabrication work for a manufacturer. So this is a relocation project from POW, so it'd be brand new jobs to Delaware, though, keeping it in the county, but brand new to the city. As part of this agreement, what they're looking for is a $10,000 assistance for electrical upgrades to the building. When the building was built as a speculative building, it was not foreseen that some of the slightly heavier machining would have to go on that would accommodate the production of a CNC machine. Therefore, the pipe, if you will, of electricity going into the building needs to be upgraded. And that's about $20,000 to $25,000 of work. So we're covering a little bit, around about half of the total work if you were to pass this grant. In turn for that, the company would be committing to the creation of 8 full-time positions here within a 3-year time period. Those 3-year positions would have, or 8 positions would have a payroll of $500,000 per year. If you do the math on that, that's a much higher than LMI, letter moderate income position, which again puts it in our target range. And I will add too, by the way, Tom and I were talking earlier about we're going to try to redo our economic development related fact sheets in the future to try to make them a little bit more standardized and our approach to showing what the return is to the community, to the city, based on the criteria and metrics the company's committing to. This is something you're seeing other communities do. We've talked about our economic development incentive policy at great length, and you'll be seeing that again here too soon. That economic development incentive policy would require us to have a way for you to see that in easy format. So I'm kind of going over that with you, but it's not on this particular one. Well, it is, but it's harder to read. So yeah, those are, $62,500 a year jobs. So that's really good. That falls in line with our goals for bringing more white collar office type jobs into the community. It is a target industry, boutique manufacturing, technology related software development. Because of the payroll and income taxes on this project, this puts us at, for a $10,000 grant, it would be 140.5% return on investment on the dollar. This would only take 1.4 years, actually, if you were able to refund that line item in our budget, it only take 1.4 years to do so off the income tax gathered off of those jobs. So I think it's a really good investment to try to help us fill a building now. It's been sitting vacant for about a year. It's been tough to fill. I always tell the owners that economic development sometimes works like a pendulum. When they finish the building, a lot of people are looking for 10 to 20,000 square foot spaces, and then it swings back to people are looking for 50 to 60,000 square foot buildings, and then it swings back the next year. They hit at the wrong point. So this is the year that people are looking for that size, and we actually have another 2 companies looking at the building too. So the electrical upgrades could go much further in helping that building to become even more usable. So we're asking for this to be passed as an emergency. Again, I apologize that the owner of the company is not here. I know you typically like to hear from them, but they're actually looking to try to get into the building soon. They actually have building permits already and whatnot to start framing out their section of the building and getting it prepared for their see.
And we would be coming back to city council if you act favorably tonight, or even if you don't act favorably tonight, but you act at the next meeting, we would be coming back for a supplemental appropriation. This money would come from the Economic Development Fund that we set up a few years ago. We've made a couple of grants before for that project. So that's and would be replenished with the proceeds from the income tax generated from that project. So that's
In 1.4 year.
That's right, 1.4.
I was listening.
1 1/3.
Questions for Sean? Motion for Sean?
So we're
really any reason to wait.
I don't think so. I mean, it's an economic development project. It's important to move these forward and get them off your docket if you can.
Well, I'll move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1806.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of the emergency clause on 1806.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 1806.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, council.
Okay,
Stay there.
item 14 is consideration of ordinance 18-07. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 18-07, an ordinance approving a community reinvestment area agreement and school compensation agreement with Midwest Acoustifiber and Metal Stars 2 LLC, Delaware City Schools and Delaware Area Career Center for investment in real property improvements on their building and parcel at 759 Pittsburgh Drive and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and is necessary to finalize economic development incentives for this project, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Is this the Sean Hughes night or
Yeah,
what?
just gonna pitch a tent up here and hang out for a while. Madam Mayor, members of council, we're here for an approval for a community reinvestment area agreement for another plant expansion for Midwest Coast Fiber. It seems like we were just here yesterday. You remember Pat By, he's plant manager for
Pat By, 3447 Sunville Way.
Thank you.
Pat was listening to instructions earlier. So this is a great opportunity to allow this company that's had a long time commitment to the city to grow yet again. If you remember correctly, we just did a 40,000 square foot expansion onto that building, and they already outgrew it with some new customers that they had. And I let Pat talk a little bit about that if he chooses here in a second. What we're asking for is 100% 10-year abatement on the improvements, being the 20,000 square foot addition onto their now, how many square foot are you up to at 40?
It's we're 130 right now, so another 20 will be 150.
Yeah. So a good sized building. I think we're running out of land, Pat.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. This is an $8.3 million investment for the 20,000 square foot. This is for more. This is actually to move some of their current storage capacity out of the 40,000 square foot into the 20,000 square foot, so they can have more lines in the original 40,000 square foot expansion to serve the new customers. They would commit to retaining the 176 employees that they committed to previously and that they already had in the plant to begin with, that had a combined $6.28 million of payroll. They would, as part of this agreement, hire 2 full-time equivalent employees, which would have an additional $324,000 of payroll in addition to that $6.28 million. In 10 years, they would be up to 10 employees in 4 years, I'm sorry, with an additional $360,000 of payroll. As you know, our abatement agreements, they were required to commit to a 3-year time period, but they're actually going to continue to grow beyond that. So I thought it'd be good to put that in there for your information. This is slightly lower than we typically like to see on a per head basis. It's a little lower than LMI, but we also have to take into account that this is base salary, and the company does pay performance based bonuses as well as overtime. So this is a really just base salary figure. They do earn more than that. This is a standard retention project for us. If they can't expand here, this really does significant damage to their ability to operate as a company. This abatement would have a 30% school pilot payment, school compensation agreement that the company would be paying directly to the schools, $54,753.70 after 10 years. So that's great for the schools. They get 30% of what they normally would have received on that expansion. They were fully in agreement with that. The abatement value after that school payment is approximately $165,000 of savings to the company. That's 11.7% of the total project investment, which is lower than usually in the economic development world. We like to keep the incentive packages to 25% or less of a total project, unless it's just enormous. This would be 11.7%. Am I missing anything? Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good project and allowing this company to continue to grow here. And with that, I'll let Mr. Bai talk a little about his need for the project.
Again, as Sean mentioned, we continue to grow. We've just launched, I think many people are familiar with Jeep Wrangler. That's actually one of the reasons why we've had to expand. We weren't expecting that business, even though FCA is a very big customer of ours. But they awarded us that business unexpectedly last year, and that basically necessitated this expansion, which is a nice problem to have. But
Is FCA Fiat?
FCA Fiat Chrysler, yeah.
And so it's for the Wrangler?
It's for the Wrangler, yeah. So it's their flagship, one of the largest programs they have. So it was definitely a nice program for us to pick up. Normally you have 2 years to do that. We have 9 months. So it's been a little bit of a scramble.
I found it interesting when we came back to meet with Pat in his conference room, there were a lot of new logos on the wall. They're serving a multitude of companies right now that they weren't serving before.
Yeah. And our original addition was we picked up Ford, some Ford business. Again, it's very regional. We have a facility in Mexico. That facility's doubled in size in the last 3 years as well. So it's if you've got to be there, you've got to be close by to the manufacturers, and we're close by to the manufacturers here. So this is our corporate headquarters as well.
How long have you owned the company?
The present owners have owned the company 5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable.
One last thing I did forget to mention, this would, I could calculate this would be about 31.21% return on investment on the dollar amount compared to the income tax gained on this project for the city. Schools is separate, there's the 30%.
When you did the last expansion, did we do one of these incentives on that one also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is actually identical to the 40,000 square foot.
If we'd known, we would have done 60,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
40.
Would have been a lot cheaper for you too.
Yeah, it's more costly to go back in and do it all again than it is to just do it all at once. So.
Any other questions?
I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 18-07.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Ms. Keller, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move to enact the emergency clause on ordinance 18-07.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of ordinance 18-07.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I want to add one thing after the vote. This is one project that we are looking to work with the Finance Authority on a sales tax abatement on the construction materials. So it's we've been looking at that on all of our projects, our ability to be able to do that, and it's been very beneficial, I think, to the companies when we take a look at doing so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask the mayor, there's a companion ordinance for a development plan approval. That's item 22 for this. I don't know if Dave could maybe explain
Sit back
that.
down.
Dave suggested I think it makes sense to take this up now, which really allows this project to move ahead. The incentives are one thing, but the planning approval is probably more important.
Okay, so Elaine, if you'll please read item 22 with consideration of ordinance 18-15.
Ordinance number 18-15. An ordinance for Fed One Dublin LLC for approving a final development plan for Midwest Acoustic Fiber for a building addition on approximately 14.70 acres at 759 Pittsburgh Drive on property zoned M2 General Manufacturing District.
Thank you. Mr. Eflin?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this project is as explained in your last case. So we'll dispense with all the normal items. It is zoned M2 General Manufacturing. We have an aerial photograph should we need it, but the expansion will be in this area. Site plan contained within your packet. Here in yellow are the original building, and yellow with the green stripes, the aforementioned last expansion, which they just moved into basically. And then the green is the expansion in front of you right now. The applicant did provide at the last expansion some additional ghosted-in parking spaces that could be triggered by the city should a parking need arise, or in the event that they don't occupy this building forever and somebody else does and needs the parking. There's another 2 parking spaces shown in a similar format here, but with the shift work involved and the nature of the building, we're comfortable as staff with the parking as shown on this plan. Your planning commission did recommend unanimous approval at their February 7th meeting, as do we, as staff. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Comments? Want to add anything?
Ready to go.
What is the wish of council?
May I ask a question of the planning director, and if you are on planning also, were there any objections raised by anyone during the course of the planning process? Did we hear from anyone at all?
No.
No. I'd make a motion to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 18-15.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 18-15.
Second.
Not seeing an emergency clause on that one. Okay.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Good luck.
Thank you for combining those.
At this time, we'll jump back up to item 15, which is consideration of ordinance number 18-08.
Ordinance number 18-08, an ordinance adopting section 718.80 through 718.95 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Mr. Stelzer?
Or Mr. Schulman, both of you?
I can start.
I know it's,
Do you want to go or you want me to go? Madam Mayor, members of council, in a prior, I believe it was a resolution, we joined a lawsuit, a group lawsuit with a bunch of other cities challenging a state provision that they put in the budget, basically allowing businesses to file through the state Ohio Business Gateway instead of filing through the city, and then they would charge a fee for that and in theory send us the money back. Didn't challenge it necessarily on the basis of, we wanted to be difficult to businesses, but more because it was a challenge against the city's ability to charge taxes and our charter home rule. In so doing, that lawsuit stayed the implementation of that section, but it only stayed until I believe it was February 26th. One of the provisions of the code said the cities had to adopt these provisions that are in this ordinance by the effective date, otherwise we would lose our ability to collect income taxes. So on the chance that either the lawsuit is unsuccessful or the injunction isn't extended, we wanted to get this in the process. So if we have to act at the next meeting to adopt those sections and preserve our ability to collect income taxes, we would have that ability to do that. However, I worded it in such a way that we're preserving our rights to challenge the suit. If our suit ultimately is unsuccessful, we would probably come back with further legislation going through more carefully what provisions of the state code would need to be incorporated into our code. But at least now we would signal that we do adopt them, so we are collect the taxes.
do you want to do
that we
the,
need to adopt it, we just had to have it read. is what-
Tonight, we have to read it.
Just read it. We're just doing the first
So don't
reading.
adopt it tonight. However, if we don't get the stay continued, we'd probably have to adopt it by the next meeting, because that if we don't do it by the end of February and that deadline isn't extended, we would want to vote then. But I don't want to hit you with something and not have another reading. So for right now, I would recommend not voting on it. I will give you more guidance based on the status of the lawsuit by our next meeting.
Well, that's what they said at the meeting. As long as you read it, the deadline's the 26th. Our next meeting's not till the 22nd.
I don't think the state would kill us over one meeting. And I have a feeling that they're continue it because there's a preliminary injunction hearing, and I think the state's been pretty reasonable so far in that, well, until we get decided, they're not even ready to start this thing, but we want to get ourselves in a position to act quickly if we're okay. So I don't think you need to vote on it tonight. I have a feeling they're going to extend that, but just in case we have it read and we can adopt it the day after, I think that'd be fine in the worst case scenario.
Any questions for Darren? This was a long thing to read and very confusing for me. I don't know about the rest of you.
It's a work of art. I will tell you that I did adopt it, adapt it from a sample that's been going around. I think this came from New Albany to start with. One thing that they did was they were actually going to go through and attempt to make all their changes in their code. What I did was say, We'll go back and fix that to make sure, because we didn't have time to act that quickly. Another difference between ours and theirs is I put in an effective date. A lot of them said effective immediately. I put in it's effective as soon as this case is done, or we need to do it. So we could pass it next meeting if we wanted to, and it just wouldn't take effect until the lawsuit's over. But I usually prefer to go more than one reading on something like this anyway.
Thank you. Item 16 is consideration of ordinance 18-09. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Yeah.
Ordinance number 18-09, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum aggregate principal amount of $10,265,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of various public infrastructure improvements, together with all related appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason that this ordinance is required to be immediately effective in order to issue and sell the notes, which is necessary to enable the city to timely retire the outstanding notes and thereby preserve its credit. Wherefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Mr. Stelter. Apologize for the last one. He's over here whispering in my ear. So
Well,
it's all yours.
I could have added some more comments to that
I'm
other
sure
one,
you could
but
have.
we'll just pass on that for now. This ordinance is reauthorizing issuance of one-year short-term notes for the Glen Road project, completed several years ago. You've seen this every year for the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. Strategically, we've financed it through short-term borrowings. That has a number of advantages, including the rates. Trying to keep track of the rates and what may be happening, because they're potentially going to be moving. We're down to the point where it looks like if we continue this practice and rates don't go too haywire, we'll have the debt paid off roughly 2028, 2029. That also anticipates a few more houses being built out there, and we don't have a shutdown on that. But we're now into a window where originally it would have been 20, 25-year debt issuance, which we didn't want to have on our books. A window of less than that with a maturity of 15 to 10 years. The interest rates are a little bit different, so I want to look at that spread between short-term rates 1 year and a 10 or 12-year issuance. And we'll do that as we move into next year. I don't know if I have anything else to add. The existing notes mature April 12th, I believe. We want to go to more meetings we can on this legislation. Entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions? Do you want to go another reading on this?
Well, if we wanted to pass it though, if you have luxury of time, do you need the emergency clause?
We don't need the emergency clause. It's kind of, they just put that in there, just anticipating if something comes up and you end up going to more than a couple readings or 3 or 4 readings. But you need the emergency clause. If you approve it today, it would be effective in 30 days, which is well before we'd be
Another reading or no? It doesn't matter to me.
It's really not, this is almost become, it is somewhat routine, but of course.
Yeah, well,
you're-
Somebody give me a motion.
Suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1809.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
So we can move to approve this without the emergency clause then, right?
You don't need the emergency clause.
Move for approval of ordinance 1809.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Moving on to item 17, which is consideration of ordinance 18-10. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 18-10, an ordinance supplementing the 2018 appropriations ordinance to make various corrections to the original ordinance adopted and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for the timely review of development plans and for the continued utilization of construction inspection services, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Guess we'll let Mr. Stelz do this one, but I really like the error. Guys, we had 222,000.
Yeah, I thought maybe you might
Council.
want to consider not changing that. This
I'll take a
actually,
raise.
even though it's a supplemental, it's actually reducing our authorized budget. What ended up tapping the actual budget ordinance, which only has a couple numbers in it. There was a typo. Instead of 22,126, it was approved at 222,120. We caught the error before approval, but I don't know how I didn't get it back into an amendment to the ordinance. The second airport one, all the budget documentation you were provided has an appropriation of 91,547 for the hangars we built out there, the additional hangars. But the budget document, the actual ordinance had a zero or didn't have an amount in there. And then the third change was with the refuse fund. We weren't sure whether the expansion, $1.8 million roughly expansion, was going to get under contract before the end of the year. So we included it in the 2018 budget. They did get the project under contract, so I've got an open purchase order that carried over. So we actually need to eliminate that $1.8 million appropriation for 2018. Entertain any questions you have, and there's no urgency again. If you want to go to additional readings.
Want to get the budget printed.
Well, the budget's being printed as it was adopted, absent these issues here.
Would it be fair to say we also don't need the emergency clause if we act on this tonight?
No, you wouldn't need an emergency clause.
Any motions, or do you want to take another reading?
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 18-10.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move for the adoption of ordinance number 18-10.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, Elaine, deep breath, and then I need you to read 18, 19, 20, 21. Sorry.
Already did it once.
Okay.
Ordinance number 18-11, an ordinance for Delmore Dwelling Corporation for approval of a rezoning amendment to allow a PMU planned mixed-use overlay district at 250 Curtis Street on the north side of Firestone Drive on approximately 3.64 acres on property zone POI, Planned Office Institutional District, for an actively owned and managed 40 dwelling unit low and moderate income affordable housing development. Ordinance number 18-12, an ordinance for Delmore Dwelling Corporation for approval of a conditional use permit allowing the placement of a PMU planned mixed-use overlay district at 250 Curtis Street on the north side of Firestone Drive on approximately 3.64 acres of property zone POI, Planned Office Institutional District, for an actively owned and managed 40 dwelling unit low and moderate income affordable housing development. Ordinance number 18-13, an ordinance for Delmore Dwelling Corporation for approval of a preliminary development plan for an actively owned and managed 40 dwelling unit low and moderate income affordable housing development at 250 Curtis Street on the north side of Firestone Drive on approximately 3.64 acres on property zone POI PMU, Planned Office Institutional District with a planned mixed-use overlay district. And ordinance number 18-14, an ordinance for Delmore Dwelling Corporation for approval of a comprehensive plan amendment on the future land use map from medium-density single-family to mixed-use at 250 Curtis Street on the north side of Firestone Drive on approximately 3.64 acres on property zone POI PMU, Planned Office Institutional District with a planned mixed-use overlay district for an actively owned and managed 40 dwelling unit low and moderate income affordable housing development.
Wow. Dave, would you like to do a overview since there's people here, or do you want to wait till next week?
I'd prefer to wait till the public hearing and per our normal course of events, deliver presentation to you at that time, but it's at your pleasure. I actually don't have it loaded into the laptop right now.
Karen?
And just for benefits of the public, it is just a first reading tonight. So the second reading and public hearing will be in 2 weeks.
Okay. We'll move on to item, 23, which is consideration of ordinance number 18-16.
Ordinance number 18-16, an ordinance for Carney Raincourt Architects approving a combined preliminary final development plan for Wolfram Roofing for a building addition on approximately 1.8 acres located at 132 Johnson Drive on property zoned M2, General Manufacturing District.
Thank you. Mr. Eflin?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I am prepared to present this evening. It is your first reading. The applicant isn't here, but that's okay. I can present it anyway. It's pretty straightforward. It's for Wolfram Roofing Company. You've already approved some incentives through Sean's group and you all for this particular project. They are located on Johnson Drive. It is zoned M2 heavy manufacturing. This is an aerial showing you the existing building and parking lot configuration as well as access. The new addition proposed will go in the only open space left, this area, with some additional parking. So you're seeing a plan here outlined in yellow of the existing structure, and in the hatched pattern is the 8,000 square foot addition. The building as it stands today is 12,000 square feet. Just to give you a sense of scale, there will be 15 additional parking spaces added with this addition. The building materials and design will look exactly the same way that the building is today, so that they'll all match. And it'll allow the business to expand. This business has expanded. I believe this is their third time in maybe as many years expanding within our community, and even being at a prior site before this. So I know they're seeing a lot of work coming their way. Your planning commission recommended approval at their February 7th meeting unanimously, as do we as staff. There are a number of conditions. The applicant was fine with all those conditions during the planning commission hearing, and there was nobody present to speak for or against this particular case. So we would ask for passage this evening and remove it from your agenda as a result.
Any questions for Mr. Eflin? You have a motion, or you want to take it to another reading?
I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings of ordinance 18-16.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Jones, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller? Yes. Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move the adoption of ordinance 18-16.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller? Yes. Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. And item 24 is consideration of ordinance number 18-17. Elaine, if you'll please read this in the record.
Ordinance number 18-17, an ordinance for Development Management Group approving a final development plan for an outlot building including Mattress Firm on approximately 1.29 acres on property zone B3 Community Business District with a planned mixed-use overlay district located on the south side of State Route 3637, just west of the Meyer gas station within the Glenwood Commons Shopping Center.
Thank you. Mr. Eflin?
Madam Mayor, members of council, I can present this to you this evening. It is a final development plan for an outlot at Glenwood Commons Shopping Center. These are out-of-state applicants, and actually we had advised them leading into today that they have to book a flight and that sort of thing to come up. So we had advised them that at the first reading, typically not to do that, and we would just read the case and proceed to second reading. So that's why they're not here this. I can present it. You can dispense with the application if you so desire, and that would save them a trip. I know they expressed a desire to be here as well. So again, nobody spoke at Planning Commission for or against this particular plan, and Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval. So just before I start and spend any more of your time, maybe by head nod if you'd like me to present it tonight at your pleasure, Madam Mayor.
Present.
Present it, okay. So this is an outlot next to the minor gas station outlot, which is to the east or the right of this diagram. The outlot is about 1.9 acres. It is zoned B3, but as you know, it has a planned mixed-use overlay for the entire shopping center, in addition to the Quail Pass apartments located behind it. A vacant lot. It's next to the stream that was relocated during the initial construction of the shopping center, and that's what's located here on the right side of your screen. That would remain undisturbed. That is under covenants and easements from the Ohio EPA, as well as from our previous zoning actions. So what's proposed is about a 6,200 square foot building shown here in green, with 2 access points off the rear private access drive. US 3637 is to the top of the screen here. And Mattress Firm would occupy 4,000 square feet of that space, leaving about 2,200 square feet of additional rentable space. They remarked at the Planning Commission meeting that this may be, they're in initial talks with perhaps a cell phone company or something like that, but those are just initial until they can obviously get these approved. Now, since this is a final development plan, we'll show you the elevations as well. These are in keeping with the planned mixed-use overlay text and in keeping with the back of the center, but also the one outlot that we have that was developed originally by the Zaremba Group, Zarcal, Incorporated, and that houses the Verizon store and a variety of other things out front. You can see the continuation of the Delaware Blue Vein Limestone, as well as brick on the columns being included, canopies, fabric canopies being included, as well as a cornice element that matches the existing center. This would be four-sided architecture as the other outbuilding is, and your Planning Commission recommends unanimous approval, as do we as staff. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. It is interesting to note this is the first construction here since the initial outlot construction. So it's a good and hopeful sign of our community and the market, and perhaps the commercial market in general. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Is there another mattress place nearby?
There's another mattress place located within the center, mattress store. It is Sleep Outfitters. I believe.
Okay, I'm not crazy. Okay. Yeah. Well, stop. Any questions for David? Besides my silly question. You going to save this guy a trip back from Tennessee, or do you want to vote on this tonight?
I'll move to suspend the rules, requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1817.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move to the approval of ordinance 18-7.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, item 25 is city manager's report.
Couple of items. One of them is the notice we received regarding the gypsy moth spraying that's going to be taking place in the, I believe it's spring, in June. That's a notification that ODNR is required to provide us. They also require us to notify the FAA of that we're aware of the spraying. We modified the letter we sent in 2015. I think you'll recall there was a considerable amount of discussion regarding the merits of this whole effort And we essentially just advised the FAA that we were aware that the application was going to be applied, but that we were not approving or disapproving of it. And I would recommend the same approach this time unless I'm directed otherwise. But I know that there was a lot of discussion about this 2 years ago. Actually, yeah, 2016, when we were notified the last time. So
There
I know-
is quite a bit of public discussion happening on Nextdoor. If anyone follows that, there are people who are, of course, again, critical of that program. And from my very basic understanding of it, we really have no choice. So the discussion's sort of an exercise in futility. So I think the way that you handled it last time is, we're aware of it.
Right.
We can't stop it. That's the best we can do.
Is that all right?
I'd
Okay.
rather we left the gypsy moths alone, but it's not a.
You also received, we received it late today, a notification from Delmore Dwellings regarding their application to the State Housing Finance Agency for tax credits, which we were expecting that. That's a routine notification that we receive for any project that's within our community applying for credit. So we have to respond back within 30 days. Whether there are any concerns, whether in the past, we have actually, in some cases, supported the credits for the Sunnyview project. We did it for Georgetown Apartments. We did it. Obviously, we'll want to have some discussion with council about that. But please take a look at that letter that Elaine, I think she forwarded out earlier today. It came in from Mr. Wilson. And
I have not, I believe I just forwarded it to you.
oh, I'm sorry. Well, we'll forward it to you, but it's a fairly standard.
There is a letter here for Mayor Riggle that.
Yeah.
I think the one request that we normally get is to provide an update, so where it is in the process, if it isn't complete yet. And that's just sort of perfunctory. Here's what they're required to do. Here's where they are in the process. Obviously, these cases have just been read once before you and are going to public hearings. So I wouldn't anticipate a problem in at least telling OFA where it is in the process.
But we'll take a look and we have to respond back within 30 days. So I'll be following up with council on that. Joint meeting with county commissioners is scheduled for Thursday, but there could be a conflict with regard to some of the services with respect to what Westville is doing for the police officers. And I think the mayor will probably reach out maybe tomorrow to the county, find out what their thinking is in that regard. We have provided you what the agenda is. There are a number of items on there. Most of them are updates and discussions. It should not take so long. But obviously, this could be preempted by what takes place on Thursday, and we'll follow up with you on that. That's all I had. There's a Main Street Heritage Ohio luncheon that all of you were invited to by Aaron Cook, who is the president of the Main Street Board. If you're able to go, that's next week at Fun's Restaurant. There's an email about that luncheon. So.
It's not even good.
Aaron Cook, I think it was sent all the, I thought it was. We'll send it out again. Okay.
You got it? Okay. Okay, council comments.
Me?
Yeah, Mr.
Just
Jones.
two real quick, with Thursday, just recall if we do have the meeting, I'm out of town. I was not gonna be able to make that commissioners meeting, so. And then lastly, I'm passing out, I don't expect you to read it, no discussion about it right now, but if you recall, a few months ago, a local group called the Citizens Climate Lobby came, Marion Gable did a presentation. I met with them recently. They are looking for a resolution of starting from the city's perspective, just encouraging Congress to follow through on something that Pat Tiberi was working on. He was a member of the bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, and trying to keep that work going forward. Basically, this is about a revenue neutral carbon dividend fee. I don't expect you to, I will follow up with each of you individually about this after the fact. So I just want to pass this out. This is just a sample resolution that the CCL had given me during our meeting just to look at, and then read it at your own convenience, and I'll follow up with you over the next, a week or two and talk about it. That's all I
I'll
have,
give it
Mayor.
to you because I already have a copy.
Thank you.
Mrs. Keller?
I am still a maybe for Thursday. I have a meeting for my business that was already scheduled that night. So I'm trying to sort of juggle that around and try to deal with my two competing jobs, having something going on the same night. But if we move it, that would be easier for me. So there's a possibility that I won't be able to make that meeting anyway.
Mr. Roy?
We'll just thank Mrs. Keller for these wonderful ribbons. Yes, thank you.
They were made by a woman who lives in the Cheshire Crossing subdivision. I do not know her last name, but her first name is Tara, and is a Worthington police officer. And so she posted these ribbons online and said that she was donating 100% of the proceeds, all to the fund going toward the officers. So,
Thank you for providing them.
thank you.
Mr. Hollinger?
Nothing.
Mr. Schaefer? All right.
And you did notice our new seats, a little more comfortable than the old
Yeah,
ones.
where you been?
I know, get Mr. Woolworth's,
Well, first
he's
council
the most experienced,
He's the first council meeting.
is it an improvement in the chairs, Tom? Is that? Yeah?
We're holding out for Christmas.
Okay, with that, it is 9:05, and I'll look for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.